Hello, this is Keenan Park, and this is YLOC 7th grade worksheet lesson 14. For our first question, we have a container of juice that contains J liters of juice. And we have an expression 5 times 3J, which shows the amount of juice in 5 3-packs. So what's another expression that represents the same amount of juice? So we can do this by multiplying. Like I said before, there's an implicit multiplication happening here, where these two are being multiplied because this 5 is right outside the parentheses with no operator between. So you multiply the 5 and the 3j, and so 5 times 3j is just 15j, because 5 times 3 is 15. So you end up with your answer of B, 15j. Alright, and then moving on, we have Asha's backpack weighs 7W kilograms and Liam's backpack weighs 2W kilograms. So you have an expression 7W plus 2W kilograms, which shows how much they weigh together. So what's another expression that shows the same thing? Like before, you just have to simplify this expression, combine the like terms. 7W plus 2W is 9W. So you end up with 9W kilograms. Alright. For our next problem, we have 5 friends that are sharing 1.2 t pounds of popcorn. And there's an expression here, which is 1.2 t divided by 5 pounds, which shows how much each friend receives. So what's another way to represent this? We just have to find what's 1.2 t divided by 5. So 1.2 divided by 5 is 0.24. So you end up with 0.24 t, which is A. So I feel like all of these should be relatively easy as long as you understand how to do your addition, multiplication, division, subtraction, all of that. So now we have 2.5 n meters of ribbon and another piece that's 1/4 n that she cuts away from it. So we're subtracting. So what's the difference? Well, 2 and 1/2 n minus 1 and 1/4 n. Well, what's 2 and 1/2 minus 1 and 1/4? One way I like to do this is you can set them to be improper fractions. So 2 and 1/2 will be 5 halves minus 5 fourths. And then if you set it to have the same denominator, you have 10 fourths minus 5 fourths, which ends up with 5 fourths. So you end up with 5 fourths, which is 1 and 1/4. And then you'll have to add the n at the end, because they both had n that we factored out at the beginning. Alright. For our next question, we have 90 goats on a farm. And so this expression, 4 times 90, represents the total number of legs, because each goat has 4 legs. So which of the following expressions also represents that? Well, we multiply 4 and 90. What's 4 times 9 is 36. Pretty simple, I think. So 36D. We just want to make sure that you're comfortable with the variables, so you don't get thrown off by these and you know how to react when you're multiplying a variable with a coefficient, a scaling factor, or you're adding together two numbers with the same variable. Two terms with the same variable, that is. Okay, and then we have Ellie and Sam who each have S boxes. Ellie's boxes weigh 1 kilogram while Sam's weigh 0.8 kilograms. So we're adding 1s and 0.8s to get the total number of kilograms. What's 1 plus 0.8? Well, that's just 1.8. So you end up with 1.8s kilograms. C. And then now we're just finding the value of these equations, or finding the value of x from these equations. So like always, you simplify by isolating the variable. Subtract 25 from both sides, you get 7x. 25 minus 25 is 0. That's why I chose that number. And then negative 40 minus 25 is negative 65. Divide both sides by 7. And then what do you get? Well, negative 65 over 7 does not turn out to be a whole number or an integer. So we'll just leave it like that. Negative 65 over 7. If you want to express it as a mixed fraction, it will be negative. What's the largest multiple of 7 that fits in 65? That will be 9. And then you'll have 2 7s left, because 9 times 7 is 63. So negative 9 and 2 7s. Alright. for our next problem, we have 8x minus 12 equals 44. Add 12 to both sides. 8x minus 12 plus 12 is just cancels out, so you get 44 plus 12 is 56. And then when you divide by 8 on both sides, you get x equals 7, because 56 divided by 8 is 7. Alright, for our next one, we have 12x plus 75 equals negative 225. So you subtract 75 from both sides, and you end up with 12x is equal to negative 225 minus 75 is negative 300. And then you divide both sides by 12. And you end up with x equals, what's 300 divided by 12? You could do long division if you can't do this in your head, but I happen to be able to do this in my head, so it's negative 25. Don't forget the negative sign. I almost did. Alright, and for our next problem, the last one on this page, we have 20x plus 500 equals 0. Subtract 500 from both sides. Get it away from the x because we want to isolate it. 20x equals negative 500. Then divide by both sides by 20, and you get x equals 500 divided by 20 is 25. So x equals negative 25. Don't forget the negative. I almost did it again. And next we have square root of x equals 16. So in order to isolate the x, we need to get rid of the square root sign. So how do we do that? We square both sides. So when you square both sides, you get x equals 16 squared. You can do 16 times 16. I happen to know that it's equal to 256. So x is equal to 256. Alright. Next up, we have x squared minus 20 equals 25. Interesting. So we're going to add 20 to both sides. And then we get x squared equals 45. And so the tricky part about this problem is that 45 is not a perfect square. So that means that we're going to end up with some number that's a radical. So x, we take the square root of both sides. And when you take the square root, you end up having a plus or minus, because when you add the square root, you don't know that the x underneath here is positive or negative, because if it's negative, it'll still end up being a positive number when multiplied by itself. So you don't really know what sign this is. So you end up with a plus or minus for the x. So x equals plus or minus, and then we get the square root of 45. And the square root of 45 can be simplified into 9 times 5, and 9 is a square number. So you end up with 3, which is the square root of 9, times the square root of 5. So x equals plus or minus 3 rad 5, or 3 square root of 5. Alright, next problem. We have 5 times, I'm going to imagine that that dot is part of the 7 that's saying what problem this is. So 5 times the quantity 8x plus 6, and that's equal to 400. So you divide by 5 on both sides. We start with this one because it's on the outside, so we have to unwrap this first to get to what's on the inside. So you end up with 8x plus 6 after we divide the 5, because these cancel, and then 400 divided by 5 is 80. Alrighty, now you subtract 6 from both sides, and once again we're going to end up with a nasty fraction. So you divide 8 on both sides, and you get x equals 74 over 8. But 74 over 8 can be simplified. If you divide both the top and the bottom by 2, then you'll get 37 over 4. And that should be our final answer. But if you want it as a mixed number, it'll be 9 and 1/4. Alright. And that was all for today. So thank you for listening.